Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
All right, welcome to the January 14th meeting of the Healthy Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Present, we have myself, Ari, we have Mark, we have staff, and we have Caitlin. And we are going to not call the meeting to order since we don't have quorum. And we are going to go right to agenda item 5A, which is review and discuss the 2026 grant documents and changes. There were grant documents sent out in the agenda packet, and I'll hand it over to staff to talk about the 2026 documents.
Okay, so we're going to start with the guidelines, but before we start, I wanted to give you all the number of the total funds that we have for 2026. It's looking at this year, we have a total of $128,000 for the grant funding. As I go through this, we'll talk about the amount change, the maximum amount that they can apply for. But I did want to make you all aware that it's $128,000 for the year. I did confirm that with finance before this. So we'll start with the application guidelines. They're pretty similar to last year. The only thing that's really changed here is the dates. Nothing crazy in this section. It's just more for the grantees to understand what
I have one really nitpicky thing about the dates. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about the bullet points, but it says projects shall be completed by, and then it says January 1, and then you're going to want to make that probably 2027. And then same for the next bullet point is 2027, and then mid-2027. So
Yes.
There we go.
Let's see. It's so small up there. Oh, edit anyway. Okay. 2027. There we go. Okay.
And the one all the way at the bottom, mid.
Yep. 2027. Okay. Thank you. Yes, that looks better. Any questions about this timeline? No? Okay. So...
I guess I will ask a question. Sorry. I do have just a comment. Will we be able to, is this a reasonable time frame for staff and the committee to get us through all this?
Yeah, it's, I aligned it with what we did last year. So we did it last year. It'll be fine to do it again this year. Nothing's changed. They'll come in and present briefly, which will be done in March. I will say this timeline, since we've pushed our meeting to the second week of the month, then all of this has been pushed back. So they'll receive their funds later than they have in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, this has all stayed the same as well. Nothing major has changed here.
Well, as you're scrolling through, I had a question about nomenclature. Again, super nitpicky, but if you scroll up just a little bit, you'll see a heading. Yeah, sure. There we go. The following projects costs are not eligible for H&I grant program funding. And I'm curious, are we an H&I grant or an H&AC grant?
It's just a Healthy Neighborhoods grant. It's the H&I is the initiative. It's no longer an initiative.
Okay. So long as like all of the, so long as it's standard everywhere, that sounds great. Yeah,
Okay.
love it.
All right. The boundaries are still the same for this year. These also have not changed. Let's see here. The focus areas have all stayed the same again. It's in accordance with the current Healthy Neighborhoods strategic plan. Once that changes, these will be updated to change what the needs are in each neighborhood. But for right now, it's staying standard with our current strategic plan. Okay, this section, we added that, and when we go to evaluate, there's a new section that staff added for proposals to receive bonus points for programming, partial programming, or potentially all of the programming held at the Hub or 5520 Traceway Drive, because they haven't officially named that facility. I did put in language that doesn't mean we want all of our proposals at this location. It's just to incentivize applicants to consider having some or all of their programming there. Again, we want programming in all 4 of these neighborhoods, and the Hub is only in 1. So I understand that. Let me know what you think on the language, if it needs changed, and if we think that this is appropriate for the grants. I guess I'm looking.
Just, I'd identify it as the Hub because I think that's how it's out in the community rather than just an address on Traceway Drive. I think it's a great thing because I think that this building's been there for 2 months, and I'm not sure, haven't heard what's going to go into it. So I think it would be a good idea to use that as a way to look at something out of the box for next year. So I support it.
Yeah, we also thought applicants could come forward with their ideas of maybe what they envision and see doing there, to maybe give the city some other ideas of how the community's looking and viewing at that space. I think it'll be interesting to see what people bring forward. Any more thoughts on this language?
I kind of like that it's vague so that we can still maybe have a little bit of ability to see, how much the bonus points will actually play a role in final evaluations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Keep moving through this. Okay, so for funding awards, last year the maximum amount was $15,000. The proposal is to change it to $25,000. With the amount that we have for this year at $128,000, if we put the max amount at $25,000 and say we want to fund everyone at the maximum amount, we could fund roughly 5 organizations. If we change the max amount to $20,000, then we could fund roughly 7 organizations. I know in the past we've done partial funding, but that led to us funding 14 organizations this year. And in terms of staff time, it's much easier to have 5 to 7 organizations that we're working with. So we're not looking to fund 14 organizations. We can do partial funding, but we're going to look more on the maximum side of things.
Just a quick question. In the past, do you know how many grant applications were requesting the maximum amount of money?
Most of them do.
Most of them, okay.
And when I talked with the organizations about this change of like, if we up the amount, but there's a chance that you might not get funded, how do you feel about that? A lot of them were okay with that. I think a lot of organizations, they could have a bigger impact with more funding.
Could I just make a comment briefly on that? I'm in support of that. I think that it just kind of forces the question that a few of us have asked, which is a better shared understanding of the criteria, because a lot of folks give us really solid grant applications. So I think the criteria that we're using to assess them, though maybe we can't change the details of it, to really kind of be on the same page about making those decisions, I think would be helpful in the approval process.
Yeah, I would agree. We're going to go through the evaluation form, and I think that's where maybe a big chunk of this discussion should be of what can we add or what can we take away to make it more clear of who receives the funding or maybe who doesn't receive the funding, because with how the evaluation form looks now, it's very easy to score everyone very highly, and so that it makes it difficult to decide, okay, they all got very similar scores, who do we cut? And that is a challenge. It's part of granting people money. You don't want to say no, but I think our evaluation criteria can be tweaked, and we can talk about that later to figure out like how could we possibly do that to make it clearer for all of us, and people who are or are not receiving funding, and letting them know why or why not they're getting it. But for right now, thoughts on 20,000 or 25,000, I guess, for the maximum amount.
Again, you're recommending the larger amount. I can support either one, I think, as Caitlin said too. I mean, and Ari's nodding her head, so if that's what you want to try it at, let's see what happens.
Okay. Well, I also thought with 25,000, you can take it down to 20,000. Like they can apply for the maximum amount, and if we're like, oh, we want to fund 7, then we can take the number down. Whereas if we started with 20, we can't up it.
And I think your idea about still partial funding, if something shows something we want to help, then we leave ourselves that flexibility. So whatever you guys feel is the best way to go, I'll support.
Great. We'll stick with 25 for the year. See what happens. We can always tweak it next year. Oh, and I also put in here, we had a question this year about an organization hadn't spent their funds in 2025 and was asking if they could still spend up until reporting is due. There wasn't language in our documents saying whether or not they could do that. So for this year, I just put some language in that the grant funds have to be spent in the year that they're awarded. This has all stayed the same as well. The rest is the same as it was last year. Any more questions on this? We can move on to the next documents. Okay. Let's find the mouse here. Oh, we got it. Oh gosh, where is my mouse? Okay, so this is what the organizations will use to apply. So when they come through, this is what I will be seeing. Not a lot has changed on here either. Let's find where we did have some. Honestly, I think most of it stayed the same as last year. The question here is, do we want to add more in terms of evaluating them? This is where the evaluation comes in. This is, are there things that we'd like to see that would help with determining who gets funding and who doesn't?
So one thing, if I could chime in here, one thing that I'm thinking about, and I don't know if this is appropriate for this part of the conversation, but I think that for me, it's not necessarily wanting more information from them. It's more related to, are we prioritizing groups that, like, different types of support that groups offer? So would we want to fund, say, 3 groups that provide food? Or would we want to, like, have a diversity in that sense in terms of the work that organizations are doing? Or do we want to weigh whether they've received the grant before or how many years they received the grant before? So again, I don't know if it's appropriate for this part of the conversation, but that's kind of where in my mind I think about how do we narrow it down.
Yeah, I think maybe it'll be better if we switch to the evaluation document. And we'll go from there. I need to find my mouse again. Okay. So I have some thoughts on maybe how we can make this a little bit better. My initial thought, we'll go through it. Down here at the bottom is where you'll have the bonus points that you'll add. But I thought at the end, when you've gone through this document, having you all rank them 1 to X, however many applications we get, of like, do you think this person should 100% receive funding, and whoever's at the end is the person you think should not receive funding out of all of these documents? What are your thoughts on doing that kind of scoring? Like, you go through, score all of these, and then rank them 1 to X.
That's the way that I did it last year. As I went through them all, I ranked them, and if we could recall, the ones that ended up at the end were some of the ones that truly didn't fit under your scope, but yet they still applied. Mm-hmm. And I think the second point of this, I think it's very important, is that some of these bigger entities that apply for support from us, they've got money coming from a lot of other sources. Mm-hmm. Some of these smaller entities may not have the same amount of money that the larger ones do. And I think I looked at the financial things. I also looked at that document that Ari gave us. And Caitlin said this, who's gotten money the last couple of years? And I think that's something we ought to be looking at too. Do we try and spread this, or do we stick with the same things? And then this group should also prioritize. You gave those 5 criteria. What is the top one this committee wants to look at as we rank? Is it food? Is it X? Is it Y? And go ahead, Caitlin, you're going to say something there? Sorry. I mean, that's the way I would look at it. But I want to make sure the group wants to do that as well. But I think it would make, that's the way I looked at them last year.
Mm-hmm. So maybe in February we could talk about how we want to prioritize, like if we want to prioritize food at the top, or if we want to go to youth services, we could determine that in February. So when you go through the documents, you all have an understanding of a collective agreement, I guess, of what we're looking for, maybe a little bit closer. The other thing I thought, like I said, if the focus is on food per se, and we don't get anyone from the Southdale neighborhood applying for food. My concern is that I want all of the neighborhoods to get some type of programming or funding going towards them. So then I thought, do we look at food, or do we look at, okay, maybe ranking food is the top priority? Is there an organization that does food and Southdale and Allied and all four of them? That one would maybe go towards the top. There's different ways that I've considered to do, but I do think that we should make sure all four neighborhoods are still getting hit with some type of programming through this grant program.
Yeah, I'll just share. I definitely agree. I think that definitely one of the criteria has to be that we are hopefully equitably including all of the different neighborhoods. But I think, yeah, then just being on the same page, because we might have our different ways of prioritizing, but I think it would be, I think, more equitable if we're saying either we're choosing an area like food or like youth programming, or we're saying we want a little bit of, representation of all of the different areas within the grant recipients. I also think this question, if we're weighing whether they've gotten grants in the past or how many times, I think that should be something we're all weighing. Maybe not a personal opinion. Again, I'm not sure what's best, but same goes for how big their budget is. Are we all kind of prioritizing folks with the smaller budgets or who have money, less money coming in from elsewhere? So just kind of, I think consistency would be good for that. So yeah, maybe at our next meeting we could talk through that.
Mm-hmm. You both have mentioned if they've got funding in the past. I'm curious to know, the question behind that question of why do we want to know if they've received funding in the past?
I can only speak for me, not Caitlin, but I think it's a matter of who's been engaged. What entities in this city are trying to get engaged with us, and it helps us to look across the spectrum. And I just use that as all those things Caitlin said. I think I try and look at as I look at the grant, and I think I like the idea of the committee saying let's formalize what's at the top this year, whether it's youth mentoring, youth education, food security, whatever it is. I think that's very good that we just all I think it's a part of it. That's all. And it's nice to know what entities have been engaged in receiving funds through our city.
Okay.
That's interesting because for me, it would almost be the opposite. As far as, let's say that an applicant has received a lot of funding repeatedly, then I would worry that they're becoming dependent on our grant, and that we, the idea behind the grant, as I understand it, is to support nonprofits in maybe building new programs or in providing additional services. And if we're just supporting year over year the same services, then I would actually worry that we're creating a budget shortfall in the nonprofit. So I guess maybe I would see it like kind of the opposite way of if you've applied before, I'd be less likely to want to give you money this time around. But maybe that kind of discussion is what we're talking about. We would maybe want next meeting, and maybe the conversation in this meeting would be, should we have some sort of criteria written somewhere on this score sheet about how frequently this organization has received money? I'm not entirely certain, but for me, that is the question underlying, have they received money before from us?
And just a quick comment, if you do have an organization that's getting funding, and initially it really was hitting a need, but those needs keep changing, then you can't just keep weighing maybe that as a priority. So looking back as, Jessica learns more and more about what's happening in these neighborhoods, then the requests are driven by the needs that are identified more. So, that there's a direct correlation to how it impacts that neighborhood. But that's what I was curious about. If they keep getting funding, do they get rated higher or the same or lower. It should be dependent on their final evaluation. Did they hit the mark? So there's a lot that would go into that to rank them a certain way if they're repeated, they repeatedly got funding, but the needs change.
From my perspective of it, if they've repeatedly gotten funding, that means that they're able to report accurately, which some organizations in the past, it's been difficult getting their financials to make sure that what we are funding, what they say that we're funding is accurate. So from my perspective, if they've gotten funding, it means that they've done their reporting well. That's just my 2 cents on that. Because that does take a decent amount of my time looking through the receipts to make sure everything is accurate and lined up. Just being fiscally responsible in terms of that.
Reporting accurately is definitely important, but the impact that they had, you know what I mean? Certainly they might align with everything, but how do you weigh that impact when you do the evaluations in the end too, and then bringing that forward to the next year if they apply again? So that's just factored in. They might meet all that criteria, their receipts line up, but is it really what that neighborhood need, or what kind of impact did it have in the end?
And then I also think that your comment about the staff time is important to consider. I'm not sure that it's the priority for my consideration with regards to this question. I think that staff time being used efficiently would, in my mind, go towards a question about how many applicants do we want to fund this year. I think that that's a very important question that we should be asking with regards to that question. I'm not as convinced that staff time with regards to this organization has applied before, they've received funding, therefore they know how to fill out the reporting. Like, that's not necessarily a thought process that I'm going to be waiting too hard, I guess.
I guess my thought behind that comment was, sometimes if an organization cannot report, then they do not receive funding, and that funding could have gone to a different organization that maybe could have had that impact. It's not so much I'm worried about my time and looking through it. It's just, we all take time to do this. And so if, like I said, if they get the funding and they receive it, that means another organization doesn't. That's okay. But if they cannot report, then they don't receive the funding, and another organization could have run their programs if they are able to report accurately.
Sure. That's actually a really good point. I mean, that almost speaks towards like a totally different question as far as, have you ever in the past, gotten to the point where it's end of the year and you have not still been able to like complete your reporting? Like, has that happened?
Yeah.
In the past?
Been and I've only been here a year, and my first year when people reported, we had an organization that we didn't give funds to because they didn't do their program, and then they can't report. And so for me, reporting just shows, I can't think of the appropriate word at the moment, but they have responsibility. They're responsible in their reporting, and if they've done it for years and years and years, they're reliable in their reporting, and so that means that their program will for sure be ran that year. That doesn't mean we don't fund new organizations. It's just something to consider. Okay, so for this document then, like I said, this is what we used last year. The reason I'm asking now is because when they are applying, the organizations have availability to this document to see how they'll be scored. So we, next meeting, can go through and determine priorities. But for this document, is there something that it sounds like if they've reported and received funding in the past, we will score them on, but in evaluating them, there any other questions that we want to ask in here?
So then did we want to add a question that says, I have received funding I applied and received funding in the past, and then like check boxes like, when did this grant start? 2018 and then 2019, and like check boxes for us evaluators to fill out. And then it's clear to anybody looking at this document that we are going to be factoring that information into our decision, but it's not necessarily the entire conversation about how we're factoring that in.
I think maybe just having a question at the end, it looks like have they received funding in the past? I mean, we have history of successfully completing grant projects. That doesn't mean completing projects with us. So I could make it more specific of have they received funding in the past, and if so, how many years?
Maybe, actually, I'm so glad that you pointed that out, that you already have a question about that. Maybe next time we'll just talk about what that means and what scores of 1 through 4 mean for that particular criteria. The criteria underneath organizational capability criteria says number 2, history of successfully completing grant projects. And then like, what does a 1 mean to all of us and what does a 4 mean to all of us? Something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing with that question is, if it's a new organization, is that going to hurt their score? Is that going to hurt where you rank them? I mean, if they're new, we have no history of them. So,
is there a question even that relates to, can you tell us if you received other grants in the past from other organizations? Like, how would you even know that answer if it wasn't asked?
I don't think I'm understanding your question.
Well, if you're ranking history of successfully completing grant projects, you're ranking them it's after they present. Like, how do you know the answer to that question?
I think let's go to their application. There's a question.
Yeah, that was my question. Is there a question in the application, that relates to that?
I know there's a section to list out other sources of funding for this particular project. That doesn't exactly address the criteria that we're really talking about.
Yeah, the history. Financial statement.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be in their financial statements.
But I think we should make it very clear, because then we would assume that it's in their financial statements, and that can get kind of gray. I don't think there's anything that directly relates to us asking about their history of receiving funds.
But I think a clarification on the history, is it for this process through H&I, or is it other grant processes they've gotten through town?
Yeah.
I mean, so somehow you've got to be able to distinguish that, and if you're going to put something like that in there, you don't want to confuse them.
Right. I think it's more confusing on our end if we're evaluating for the history when they're not giving it to us.
And as Ari said, if they don't have a history, does that really justify them getting a lower score because they haven't proven, if they're responsible or not?
Right. So looking at the documents now, we don't ask them for it. Is that a question we want to keep in when it comes to evaluating?
Maybe we could change the question to be something like frequency of application to our grant, to the Healthy Neighborhood Grant.
I think it would be more, we would look to add something to their application form of them identifying that they've received funding in the past.
I don't think that that information would help me identify if I want to fund this organization.
In terms of the when you're evaluating for the history, right now we're not gathering anything from them in the
Correct.
application.
And I think that that's a good thing.
So-
I'm suggesting not adding anything to the, well, okay, I'm just one voice. I'm happy to be overridden, but I'm in favor of not adding anything to the application. And instead, we wouldn't grade them on that criteria. We'd grade them on a different criteria, some sort of criteria that we do have information about, some sort of criteria around the frequency of having applied to our grant. But if other people want to gather the information about have you applied to other grants around town and then evaluate your ability to apply for grants, I mean, that's fine. We can add that. I don't want to add that, but.
No, Ari, I think you're right. We look at the focus on here, what's happened through the H&I process. And so I would agree with you on that. I think that makes it easier as we get through this. But the other piece you said, Jessica, is, as I remember these from last year, everybody put in their grant request. We got from this group 2015, 2017. I remember reading a lot of that. These applications said they're letting us know that. Mm-hmm. So it may already be coming as to what's in there, even though we're not asking for it. That's just what I recall. I could be wrong.
Some of them do include that. I know this year I don't know for certain, but I feel like I've already had new organizations reach out to me about our funding. With how the federal landscape looks, a lot of organizations have gaps in funding. So I do anticipate more than what we got last year with new applicants. I think we just want to keep that in mind. I guess my concern is that question may skew where you rank organizations. Because if you take that number into account, say you give one a 4, and the other one doesn't have a history, it'll skew the numbers.
Well, then maybe we have to add another criteria of how innovative is your project. I mean, I feel like we're trying to maybe put too much into one criteria.
Could I just bring in the language from the application, and the guidelines? It says application eligibility, and then the 3 bullet points are, new programs with a strong and realistic plan for success, continuation or expansion of existing programs with a history of success, and new small-scale capital projects. So to me, it looks like it's a both and in terms of we want to fund the continuation or expansion when they can demonstrate success. And we also want to fund new innovative programs. So yeah, just that I think it's a both and we just need to be able to ask the right questions to answer, which category they fall under.
Okay, then for this document, do we want to leave it as is for now? And I can add it to the documents that'll be released on Friday, so then they understand that this is what they'll be evaluated on. that you think would be good for that position, please have them apply. We're looking for somebody who can be in all 4 of these neighborhoods and be a resource to the community. I think that's all of the updates for now. Is there anything else you can think of, Jill?
Were there any updates about the micro grant program that we initially discussed last time, or about the strategic plan that we've been kind of discussing in the background?
Yes. So for the micro grants, staff is working internally to see how that would look. It's kind of the micro grants, there's a lot of things that need to be planned in place, but there are discussions happening, but nothing has been set in stone for the micro grants. So strategic plan is coming along. We've got all the numbers and all the data. It's just now making the document. That has been like a weekly thing for me, is to get a section done a week. But with the grants coming, that takes a lot of time. So then it just gets shifted. Like with the housing plan, what I've told a lot of people, they have consultants come in and create those plans. For this, the Healthy Neighborhoods plan, it's me creating the plan, which is great. It just means it does take longer than some of the other plans. And I just want people to be clear on that, of like, oh, well, this plan only took this long. And yes, but they have a whole consulting team helping with that. So the strategic plan is coming together. When the draft is done, like I said, you all will get it and can see that draft document. Great points, though. Thank you.
Any announcements?
I was going to mention how I spoke with Ari, and maybe if other committee members watch this, but I was hoping that in February's meeting that there could be more of an informal discussion about just this advisory board in general, and thoughts from members about what they feel their responsibility is, what sort of initiatives they might be thinking out about, and just moving forward. Because again, Jessica's got a year under her belt. The grant program still seems like, there's time we can take some time and talk about that, but really an opportunity for me to learn about, the thoughts of the board members. I'm interested to hear what kind of information they might be able to provide from their individual neighborhoods that they represent, and needs that they're seeing. And again, just a really casual conversation about, what this board feels their main responsibility is, and how they feel about their position here. So I did ask Ari about putting an open discussion like that on February's agenda, if there's time.
All right. If there are any other announcements, say them now. Amazing. Our meeting is closed. Thank you, everybody who came.